Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I'm Jackie Janning-Lask. I'm the executive lead for the S&T 2030 strategy. And I want to talk to you today about not only the implementation, but also some expectations and get a better understanding of what we're looking for and for some of the folks out there in AFMC,
Hopefully that was good.
How you
Okay,
can
great.
contribute and how you can help. But there's three things that I want to talk to you about that I want you to keep in mind as you go through today. One is this is General Pringle's first priority, which is to accelerate S&T 2030. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. What does accelerate mean besides going fast? What do we want to do in order to make the things happen for the warfighter faster? The second thing I'd like you to keep in mind is the Air Force S&T strategy. This is not just AFRL. So it encompasses the MAGCOMs. It encompasses um, the S&T priorities across the Air Force. And so keep that in mind as we talk a little bit more about that. And then this is Impact Week. And as I was thinking about Impact Week, I thought, you know what, it must be how folks can help us impact this change. And so I read a little bit more on some of the advertisement, and it said it's a showcase of the collective impacts across the Air Force Research Lab, AFMC. And so I challenge you today to more importantly, see what you can do to help us move a little bit faster, a lot faster, in implementing the S&T 2030 strategy and making General Pringle's priority a reality. So I took a little unofficial survey yesterday, and I'd like you to keep these things in mind as well. What are the characteristics of a successful program? And so I'm going to go over pretty much the top 5, top 6, and I want to talk about address how that fits with the Air Force S&T 2030 strategy. So one of the characteristics of a successful program is that the team understands the complexity. And when you think about S&T 2030, it's a very complex activity. We're looking at warfighter requirements for the future. We have organizations like the Air Force Warfighting Integration Capability that is helping us look at what those future capabilities are. So it is very complex, and we're spending a lot of time addressing those complexity issues. As Mr. Blackhurst said, you're going to hear from Chris Ristich. I believe it's right after my presentation today, and he'll talk about some of those things that they did in order to address the complex nature of a transformational capability. The second is to integrate ideas or collaborate. That is what S&T 2030 is all about in terms of partnerships, collaborating with innovation. And later in the week, I believe you're going to be addressed by Dr. Bartholomew and some of the collaborative innovative ideas that he has. The third thing is measures and measures of effectiveness. You know, we all understand that metrics need to be smart, right? We talk about specific, measurable, achieved, relevant, or reliable and timely. But the other important aspect is metrics need to be reported and they improve. And beyond being reported, they need to be measured. So if they're measured, they increase fast. If they're reported, they improve faster. And if they're compared, they improve even faster. And so that is part of the implementation process that I have been challenged with in phase 2 is what are the metrics or measures of effectiveness that will tell us how good or what is the level at which we have accomplished S&T 2030 objectives. And so that is a very challenging part right now. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we go through each one of the objectives. The fourth in my unofficial survey, the fourth characteristic of a successful program is disciplined processes. That is also part of the implementation. So as I go through each one of the objectives in 2030, I also want you to think about the framework that I'm using is people, process, and tools. So how do we have the people or the team set up in order for the implementation? What are the processes, and again, those discipline processes that we'll use for implementation? And what are the tools that will enable us to get there faster? So Mr. Blackhurst mentioned something very important on digital engineering. And so when we speak about discipline processes, it's the systems engineering, the digital engineering that's going to help us get there. So I'm going to add a little commercial here for the digital campaign that AFMC has started under General Cooley. And I am the LOE 5 champion for that, which is workforce and culture. And so what are the training requirements needed? How do we address this culture change? And can we build those tools that will allow us to adapt faster and move faster in this technical environment? And then the last, or maybe it's not the last, but it's the expectations and the roles and responsibilities in order to execute. So that's the people part. So we talked about people, process, and tools, and setting up what those expectations are from the workforce. What are the roles and responsibilities in order to execute? And so those are my top 5 characteristics of a good program. And the last 3 are the ones that I'm going to be focusing on in the implementation of the 2030 strategy. Now, all of these are underpinned by one very significant characteristic, and that is commitment. We are very committed to moving forward and faster. It is an imperative that we must be ahead of our adversaries, and that these are the tools and the objectives that will get us there. So we'll talk a little bit about where we've been and where we're headed. In the spring of 2019, then Secretary of the Air Force, Heather Wilson, signed out the S&T 2030 strategy. The best part about this, I think, and what makes it so lasting, is that it was aligned with the National Defense Strategy. It said, you know, we really need to strengthen our alliances with our partners, whether they be other services, small businesses, academia, non-traditional organizations. And so that is a very lasting activity as well in partnering. It also said we need to build a more lethal force, and we need to be able to strengthen our technology and reform for that greater performance and effect, and be able to afford the technology and the capabilities of the future. So that hits to my first characteristic, is understanding the complexity, right? And integrating ideas. And so integrating ideas from the NDS, integrating ideas from small business or non-traditionals or academia. And so those are the things that are going to get us across the finish line with S&T 2030. This isn't going to happen overnight. This is going to take a while for us to keep moving forward with the vision of the S&T strategy, which is an Air Force and Space Force that dominates time, space, and complexity across all of our operational domains. So I'm going to hit each one of the objectives, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done and where we're headed in terms of people, processes, and tools. And as I mentioned, keep in mind how your organization or you personally can help us move forward and faster. So of the 3 objectives that the S&T 2030 strategy has, the first is to develop and deliver transformational strategic capabilities. The second is to reform the way S&T is led and managed. And the third objective is to deepen and expand the S&T enterprise. Now, under the develop and deliver the transformational capability, the strategy says that we need to look at an 80% enabling and enduring portfolio and a 20% transformational capability. So what does that mean? What that does is it allows us to spend 20% of our effort in the transformational component, optimizing those driving future force capabilities through bold leap aheads with experimentation and prototyping. And Mr. Chris Ristich will talk about the Transformational Capability Office a little bit later, and how what they're doing in terms of vanguards. You heard earlier General Pringle address Skyborg and some of the vanguards. That allows us to meet the overarching objective or the intent of the strategy that says that, you know, we need to build a more lethal force. And so we want, in terms of the transformational portfolio, we want to make sure that it's future force driven. So we are engaging very closely with Air Force Warfighter Integration Capability, AFWIC, and Space Force, and other organizations and MAGCOMs that will give us those signals of future force capabilities. The other important thing is the strategy calls for a system of systems approach, sustained collaboration, and capability versus technology. And so we talked about the transformational element, which is 20% of our portfolio, which focuses on the system level capabilities. But our history and our legacy is within the enabling enterprise. The future of Air Force Research Lab and the Air Force Science and Technology component is channeled or levied in the ability to optimize those far-reaching things, to optimize discovery, to optimize the maturing technology, rapid response efforts, and solving the capability gaps that the MAGCOMs have right now. So that's the 80% focusing of enabling and enduring technologies in order for us to stay relevant and responsive for the warfighter. Keep in mind also that the 80% is a very planned portfolio. It's a very strategically focused, technology centered portfolio that will allow us to feed in and build those capabilities that we need and that the transformational component will help us carry across. And when I say carry across, it's carrying across that valley of death. How do we ferry it over to the centers and the PEOs that will be able to execute and deliver and acquire the systems of the future? The second, well, let me touch real quick on where we're headed with that. So in 2020, the TCO office reached initial operational capability, and they'll talk a little bit about how they are using the tools and processes that will allow us to move forward faster. Things like vanguards, ways to reach the warfighter through war tech and out to the community through Air Force Explore, and any kind of disruptive capabilities that our scientists and engineers may be able to provide in a disruptive capability seedling effort. And Chris Ristich will talk more about that a little bit later. But it really is you out in the community and in Air Force Materiel Command and across the Air Force that can help us collaborate, bring these technologies to bear in forms of capabilities and help us move faster. And so that's objective one, which is the transformational capability, and more specifically, developing and delivering transformational strategic capabilities. The second objective is reform the way S&T is led and managed. And part of that is establishing a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer. However, right now we are awaiting further guidance on how we are going to achieve that. It's most important to recognize, however, that we have used this objective to better understand how we can best manage innovation across AFRL and all of the Air Force. It clearly is an underpinning of how we can move forward and how we can accelerate. So when you think about how programs are led and managed, and I mentioned earlier about ferrying these programs across the Valley of Death, reforming the way S&T is led and managed is critical for us being able to move these capabilities, streamline them into our acquisition process and our acquisition centers. And so how do we do that quickly? I mentioned digital engineering earlier. So for those of you out there, there are lots of tools, training. DAU has courses, AFIT has courses that you can access from your desktop at home and get the training that we need in order to lead and manage S&T differently and get it across that valley of death faster. The third objective is a heavy focus in phase 2, which I'm leading. Now, phase 1 did an incredible job under the leadership of Mr. Tim Sekulich to design the elements of the S&T 2030. They developed the concepts, they developed implementation schemas, and they developed ideas in which we could move faster. And so my role is to implement those in terms of the roles and responsibilities and expectations, the people, processes, and tools, and how can we move there faster. So objective 3 is to deepen and expand the Air Force S&T enterprise. And so how do we do that? Later today, as Mr. Blackhurst mentioned, you will hear from Julia Paracott on the workforce human capital process or operations that has come out of 2030. We are in a position where there is a competition for talent. And while I believe that Air Force Research Lab has the best of the best, and General Pringle's priority 3 is to make sure that we maintain the best workforce, there are opportunities that are out there for us to reach different types of capabilities or skills and talent. We have a modern recruiting platform that we're looking at furthering opportunities to reach out to those people who may not understand what we do in the Air Force or want to practice or research particular skills. We have varied hiring authorities that will get there. I think most importantly, under the human capital schema is this ability to upskill and shape the workforce. We are at a pivot that will allow us to build on our skills and our experience, things like digital engineering, systems engineering, the concepts that are out there to truly become digital, to make things happen faster. That's going to be an upskilling exercise that everyone from across AFRL will need. The other ideas that have come out of this human capital opportunity are things like exchanges with other organizations. So perhaps taking someone from the workforce and moving them into outside industry, maybe Google, maybe an OEM, perhaps academia, perhaps I call it a hostage trade with one of the centers within AFL-CMC, right? Give them the opportunity to help ferry a technology or capability across, put them in with the PEO, and also take some of the PEO talent and move them into the research lab just to get a better understanding of what we do and how we do it in the research lab. It is truly a learning culture and a culture change in terms of workforce. And so as we're implementing the processes of this, Ms. Julia Paracott will talk to you about that later today. But I want to leave you with this idea in terms of a culture change. Now it is more important than ever in General Pringle's priority 3 to look at things like the culture change, the shaping of the future, the diversity and inclusion opportunities, working with other organizations to team and collaborate to make each other better in terms of the S&T enterprise. So those are the processes that we will be putting in place from a human capital perspective that will enable those opportunities for not only our S&T workforce, but for industry, academia, non-traditional, small businesses, to bring that collective thought force together. The second part of Objective 3 on the implementation schema in the phase 2 is partnerships. How we will be implementing our partnerships. What are those elements of partnering that will be important to the future scaling of Air Force S&T 2030? Mr. Brian McGilton, as Mr. Blackhurst said, will be discussing that with you today. But I think one of the important things I want to share with you is the expectation for this expanding scientific presence that we want across the nation and internationally as well. And so centers of excellence, university collaborations, regional hubs, the opportunity for us to mimic some of the things that the Army Research Lab has already accomplished with their open campus. So just imagine how we can reach out and partner with universities across the country to look at future concepts, future skills, things that we don't even think about existing right now in terms of skills, in terms of capabilities and technology. So this is a great opportunity to open that door to the future. And this is another opportunity for a commercial for our service to connect and our ability to have a more visible front door. And you're going to hear a little bit about that today. And if at the break you feel so inclined, you can go to https://airforcetechconnect.org. And that will give you a sense of where we're headed in that open door concept, front door concept. The last thing is we want more strategic partnerships. We want tri-service, international. How can we partner even with folks who, have an idea and they're working out of their garage? How can we truly bring that to bear in terms of our technology and our capability? And so that gives you a snapshot of the people, processes, and tools that are needed in order to enable what we want to do in the implementation or the phase 2 of the S&T strategy, 2030 strategy for the Air Force. Let me just check my notes here. So the first objective, as I mentioned, or the first priority of General Pringle, is to accelerate 2030. And so that's what we're here for. The second objective is 2 services, 1 laboratory. And so through the processes that we are implementing, whether it's through partnerships, whether it's through the workforce and expanding and shaping the workforce, or the transformational capabilities, we are bringing in the Space Force right by our side and integrating those activities. I'm going to go back to the 5 characteristics I shared with you of a successful program, and one of them was the collaboration piece. Collaborate, be innovative. And so we're doing that, and we are supporting General Pringle's second priority of one lab, 2 services in that aspect. And her third priority, which is the best AFRL, simply through the human capital piece of Objective 3 in the Air Force S&T strategy of how we're doing things differently, how we're reaching out to get the best of the best, how we're upskilling our workforce, how we're changing those processes in order to move faster. We're collaborating and integrating across TDs to fulfill the 80% enabling and enduring and building to that 20% transformational portfolio. So the Air Force S&T 2030 strategy brings that all together. And while I said phase 1 did the heavy lifting, I cannot thank Mr. Sekulich enough for his leadership and his perseverance and stick-to-itivity and thought pieces that he left for phase 2 of the implementation. It is allowing us to accelerate the pace of change for Air Force, work that culture shift with this continued momentum, and truly build a stronger Air Force S&T force for the future. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and attention. I hope you take advantage of this week, especially during the COVID situation. This is a great time to get learning points or better understand Air Force S&T And I just want to thank you for your time, and I look forward to teaming with you in the future to build a better Air Force. Thank you.